Hey. Oh, it's a good day. I'm wondering one thing just before we get started. Is the picture behind us crooked or is the camera crooked? Because I've been filming from this position for a while and I've noticed that I feel like maybe, I don't know if anybody else has noticed this.
Now everyone is gonna notice it.
Right, is the picture behind me crooked, and whoever's the OCD or type A person is gonna just it's just gonna drive them up the wall.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably take it down.
No, we won't take it down. It's just gonna have to be what it's gonna be. So yesterday was 14, today is Matthew chapter 15, and we continue to walk with Jesus as he walks with the people and teaches his disciples and just continues to go along this journey. And our journey is towards Easter. So we continue along, and glad that you're joining us and glad that you're continuing to be part of this. Whether you're every day or just here and there, either way is okay. Before I ask you what you found when you read, the one thing I wanted to mention in chapter 15 is that I just couldn't get around this, so I had to just bring it up. Is that in verse 2, the Pharisees are upset with Jesus' disciples because they don't wash their hands.
Before they eat.
Before they eat. I'm just saying it's important.
Yep.
Now, it's not important enough for me to get on Jesus about and like go crazy on that because, hey, he talks to the Pharisees and he works them over pretty good. But I'm just saying it's important to still wash your hands. Okay, we've got a whole hygiene thing on our YouTube page about washing hands. I have a 2-minute hygiene video.
Yep.
On the YouTube page.
We've been singing the ABCs a lot.
That's right. Hands clean and away from the face.
Yep.
So anyway, I just wanted to jump into that in the beginning. So theological. We're getting deep here with the hand washing of the disciples. But what was something that really just kind of jumped out for you as you were reading chapter 15 today?
For me, it was this passage about feeding the 4,000. And this is a scripture that I've heard before, that Jesus takes loaves and fishes and feeds the multitude. But I think what stood out for me today was just saying that Jesus says, I have compassion for the crowd because they have been with me now for 3 days and have had nothing to eat. I do not want to send them away hungry, for they might faint on their way. And to me, yes, this is a miracle. And yes, this is a spot where Jesus takes something really small and magnifies it and feeds all these people. But I think what struck home for me today was that it wasn't anything outrageous. It was really simple food, and that he just fed people. Mm-hmm. And I just think that he had compassion for them, and so he wanted to feed them. And I just think it's sort of, for me, triggers a couple different things about what we can do to just have compassion for people. We can feed them. So if someone's having a baby, we feed them. If somebody has a death in their family, we feed them. I think right now, like if people are struggling, we feed them.
Insecure kids.
Yeah. And
food
Ardmore's doing that with trying to help kids in our community that have food insecurity. But I also think it sort of nudges to or alludes to that Jesus, like when we break the bread and when we drink the cup, it's remembering Jesus' compassion for us. So I don't know. To me, that was just the connection that I made, and that's what stood out for me tonight.
I like that a lot. After my funny piece about washing hands and the disciples and everything, what really stood out to me was the Jesus' interaction with the Canaanite woman. And there's a lot of this chapter I have to read through a couple times, and I'm like, what is Jesus talking about? Jesus, I need help too, just like the disciples were, and it can make my head hurt at times. I'm like, Jesus, what were you trying to say? I really just want to know the clear. Just tell me. But we don't have that. And instead we have these other things and these parables and these engagements that Jesus has with people. But what I saw from this woman was her first interaction is screaming out to Jesus, Lord, have mercy on me. Have compassion, as you were just talking about, compassion on me. And Jesus, everywhere he goes, he listens to people and he gives them his time and his energy and healing. Mm-hmm. And in here, it's interesting that Jesus continues to walk by. He doesn't do anything. He just doesn't. I'm trying to find the place in the scripture where it says that he did not answer a word in verse 23. He didn't say anything. She's screaming out towards him, and he's not saying a thing. And the disciples are like, well, should we just send her away? She is bothering us. She is loud. She's obnoxious. She is in our way. Can we send her away? And Jesus does not tell them to send her away. So it's interesting that this is a really a bit of a different interaction that Jesus is having with this woman. But the end of the story, I mean, it's a short little group of 7 verses. At the end of the story, we go to verse 28, and he just says, and she's calling out for her daughter who is demon possessed, and he goes, "Woman, you have such great faith. You have such great faith. Your request is granted." You know, what I thought about that was persistence. Mm-hmm. That she was persistent in pursuing Jesus, and her faith didn't waver when the answer didn't come.
Yeah.
That Jesus didn't respond, but that didn't change the way that she reached out towards him in her persistence of her faith. She didn't say, "Oh, Jesus must not be the one I thought he was because he hasn't answered me right in this moment, right at this second, right in this space."
Yeah. And
instead, she continues and continues and continues. You know, those persistent people who want something to get done, and they just keep on you and on you and on you and on you, kind of like my 2 little boys.
Like our kids.
Yeah, exactly. If you need to learn persistence, just learn it from them. But in all seriousness, what happens is that a lot of times then you give in.
Well, yeah, and they get our attention.
They do. And her faith never wavered. So her persistence of her faith brought about a great thing, brought about what she was looking for. Not to say our persistence of faith is always going to bring us what we're looking for, but to say that she continued and she fought through. And I feel like there's so many times that we reach out to God and say, "God, please let me hear a word from you." Mm-hmm. And we hear silence. And sometimes maybe we think that we're just not getting anything from God. And I think other times, God's saying, "Why don't you shut up and listen?"
Yeah.
You know, you talk so much, blah, 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 blah. And what God really wants us to do is just be quiet for a second.
Yeah.
If we're talking, when does God get the chance to speak?
Well, and I think too, all through Scripture, God's voice is compared to a still small voice. And if it is that really quiet, really still moment that you hear God, you're right. If you only are talking, you don't get that opportunity to hear.
So I just loved, when I read this, I just was like, man, she is so persistent and she doesn't give up, and her faith does not waver even in the silence that Jesus had. Mm-hmm. And I would say, for whatever we're going through and whatever we're in, you know, maybe you've been reaching out to God about something for a long time. Or maybe in the midst of a struggle right now, you're saying, you know, I'm reaching out and I feel like I'm not hearing anything. But maybe the problem is maybe we're talking too much. Or maybe God hasn't, it just isn't ready to answer yet.
Yeah. Or God's still working on it.
And God, yeah. And so I think part of this is that Jesus wanted to teach his disciples that we just don't send people away. And so it happened. But she persisted. Yeah. So my encouragement is that we continue to persist on. You know, that hope is there and compassion is there. She said, "Have mercy, have compassion." And did he? He did. And that continues with us today, that Jesus has compassion on us, that God is with us, that God continues to walk with us and does not leave our side ever. So that's chapter 15. Do you have any other words for?
No, that's it.
Cool. Well, that's chapter 15. We're going to be celebrating a birthday tomorrow. Finley turns 5.
This weekend.
The big number. Cinco. The big number 5. I did fail Spanish too.
Okay.
It's a true story. But anyway, Finley's turning 5 tomorrow, which was Saturday, the 21st. He's officially 5 on the 22nd.
Yeah, but we're going to celebrate tomorrow.
We're celebrating tomorrow. So anyway, we will join you back on Monday and back at it with chapter 16.
Matthew 16.
16. So we're going to continue on, and we're getting closer to Holy Week and closer to Easter. So if you haven't joined us yet, jump on and continue. Let's hit the final stretch together, and see where we end up. So that's it.
Have a good night, y'all.
Guys. Have a great night, and
have
we'll
a good
talk.
weekend.
That's right. Send us some pictures about the best part of your weekend, and we'll do a compilation later. So we'll talk to you then.